Welcome to the Tribal Hub webinar titled Bringing Broadband Services to Tribal Communities, brought to you in conjunction with Khajiit. Special thanks to their team for putting this presentation together. We get asked so much about broadband and the funding and where to even start, sustainability, all those questions. We've all talked about it. And I'm really excited to see this presentation and to hear from all of our presenters to see where we can find some new insight. This session is going to be recorded. It will be available to everybody here on tribalhub.com. Everybody will also be getting an email tomorrow that has a link to the recording. You can feel free to share that with anybody on your team or post it, etc. So it's there for sharing. A couple of learning objectives to take away from this webinar while you're going through the slides. We're looking to learn the components of a private wireless network and the benefits for deploying these for tribal nations, and also how a private wireless network is working at the Nebraska Indian Community College. If during the presentation you have questions, feel free to use that chat, or you can also use that Q&A feature. That Q&A will come directly to myself and to the presenters. So what's coming up at Tribal Hub? We are really gearing up. Oh, I have the wrong slide in here, you guys, sorry. This should be our TribalNet slide. So we have TribalNet coming up in San Diego in September. It's going to be great information on our website if you're interested in attending. So now I'm going to stop sharing and hand it over to the Khajiit team to do intros and start our presentation.
Gotta get the right one. Here we go. Everyone can see my screen okay?
Yeah, it looks great.
Perfect. All righty. Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Thank you for joining. I know we're kind of racing up to a long weekend, so thanks for offering up your time to hear a little bit about Khajiit and our work together with NICC, and that'd be the Nebraska Indian Community College as the acronym. So quick introduction myself, we'll go across the team. So I'm Steve Roverino. I joined Khajiit just shy of 2 years ago. I had a company in California, Nevada called Red Rover Ltd. Got started 10 years ago at the behest of an equipment manufacturer to look at building private networks, 4G at the time, private 4G cellular networks for educational institutions, universities, K through 12s. Back in the day, the FCC provided them many years ago the 2.5 or what's now known as EBS spectrum, educational broadband spectrum. So 12 years experience working with the 2.5 spectrum and deploying in educational purposes, and joined Khajiit to expand those services nationwide at this point in time. And via 2020 and the COVID crisis is really how Michael, Justin, and myself got connected in their operation in providing connectivity during COVID. Michael, I'll pass it on to you.
Oh, no, not a problem. Well, it's nice to meet everybody virtually. My name is Michael Oltrey. I'm the president of the Nebraska Indian Community College. And I've been around, in the tribal colleges since about 1995. So that's just me in a nutshell.
Click the wrong button.
Justin Cochon, Chief Information Officer for Nebraska Indian Community College. Been here since 2003. And like Steve was saying, we started the EBS and wireless technology during the COVID crisis in 2020. So I've been working in that for the past three and a half years.
Perfect. Oh, now this thing's locked up on me. Hang on. There we go. So for this first presentation in this session, we are going to have Q&A at the end, but anyone that is timely and pertinent, if there's something we're covering and you want to jump in there and ask a question, feel free to interrupt us. We want this to be as interactive as possible, makes it more meaningful for everybody out there. So what is a private network? Everyone's very used to a cellular network, whether it be AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, right? And that's a commercial network. You're paying for the service, and the carrier, puts up the towers and provides the internet and phone voice connectivity. And that works great. I mean, if you have good cell service, good cell coverage, that's awesome. Off you go. The bigger challenge, and we'll hear a little bit about this from the point of NICC, is it's more difficult in certain areas where the carriers just do not see it profitable for them to provide enhanced services. So, especially in rural areas where the cell carrier may put up a single tower and hope for the best to get as many residents and consumers onto that network as possible. They're really not worrying about getting connectivity for everybody. And kind of corollary to that, one would think in an urban environment, cell service would be great everywhere. That may not be the case. It may be in certain social economic areas, there's less investment in infrastructure. Again, just because it's not as profitable for the carriers to provide services to certain areas where they're just not seeing it making money for them. So the private networks is something that is custom built for the particular application or usage pattern. In the case of like K through 12, they may put up a private network on some of their school properties to service specific communities in the area that maybe can't afford internet, or internet services is slower on the priority list of living day to day. But we even see in the case of universities, them building private networks for either research or smart agriculture, security cameras, stadiums and sporting events. So the summary of what a private network is, it's a purpose-built 4G or 5G network, built at the specific needs and use cases for a end user. In some cases, these are owned and operated by the customer. In the case of like NICC, in some cases, these are deployed by the end customer, but operated as a managed service by the provider who built that network on their behalf. We see both use cases depending on the application and the capabilities of the customer. So what does it do? It extends the network. So where you have carrier service, that's great. Where you have lack of carrier service, you can look at a private network to augment and assure that everyone has internet connectivity for their needs. It's a way you can have better throughput. You can really tune where the antennas are at, where the towers are placed to meet the consumer base. And in some cases, it just gets down to economics. If you're paying, even if it's as low as $10 a month for a data carrier plan, you multiply that by hundreds, if not thousands of residents or consumers, that price tag can get quite exponential. So there's a lot of cities that are looking at the smart city concept where, hey, they're paying $20 a month for a carrier plan. But if they do the math across 100 to 200 SIMs, they find out that it's actually perhaps cost effective to put up their own private network and eliminate that ongoing expense of a carrier. So next slide, Mike, I'll let you kind of talk a little bit about your college out there.
Thank you very much. Well, the Nebraska Indian Community College, we've been around since 1973. We've had our own accreditation since 1986. During COVID, we're one of the schools that actually gained in student enrollment. For example, during the 2021 school year, we had 426 unduplicated headcount, and up to last year where we had 1,111 unduplicated students. So NICC has been growing. We're a 1994 land grant. We're a tribal college. We have 3 locations in Nebraska, the Macy location on the Omaha Reservation, the Santee location in Santee, Nebraska, on the Santee Reservation. We have an urban location at the South Sioux City site. And then we also have a partner with Pawnee Nation College in Oklahoma. And so we do whatever we can to serve our students as best we can. We currently offer associate degrees, and we actually just had a press conference this morning announcing our first 4-year program in business administration and tribal nation building. Before COVID, we were entirely face-to-face. And when I say entirely face-to-face, with our 3 locations, we almost always had some kind of a VTC type of system set up. So we'd be able to offer the, one course with one instructor in one room on one campus, and then it would beam out to the other 2 locations. So that was kind of NICC and in a nutshell.
Okay, perfect. Oop. I'm going the wrong direction here. One more back. Okay, thanks. All right, next slide. And Justin can fill in the blanks on this. So this was our original deployment during 2020. The cities of Pender, Walthall, and Rosalie were predominantly K through 12 education institutions. And to rapidly deploy, and this is the summer of 2022, so we had a real horse race going on to get everything ready to go by the start of the school year. I would think we missed the exact start of the school year, but we were probably just 1 month behind. Yeah, the school started early in August, and we were pretty much built out by early September. The Macy campus, that's the main campus where NICC is located in the area. And the idea here was to get mobile hotspot devices and or external devices to students that they can check out from the school, take home, and conduct their online learning courses. Justin, anything you want to add to this?
Just, the biggest thing is locating your towers and where you're going to put it. We set up an MOU, a memorandum of understanding with the local high schools to provide the backhaul, which took a lot of the monthly expense out of the equation to make this a little easier. It's all an educational network, so we don't allow to stream like Netflix and etc. because this is running on an E-rate backhaul from the local high schools. We did have to set up like a point to point from Bancroft to get to the Rosalie Tower because there wasn't any good internet service in Rosalie, but the point to point worked fairly well and we're getting good quality service there. And that's a lot of work. Make sure you have good contractors to help you out.
Exactly. So what this image represents is this is a RF model of the coverage capability from each of the locations. And these weren't necessarily tall towers. We were moving at a very fast rate, and to meet the start of the school year, to put a purpose-built tower would add additional cost and delays in getting deployments. So we were doing things like just putting small masts on top of school buildings. So we'd look for the tallest building that the school had there, and then place the equipment on top of it. As we go to the next slide, we'll kind of look at some of the expansion. We can talk about how now Justin and team are looking to fill in some of the gaps by using purpose-built towers and leveraging NTIA funding to make that happen. So here's kind of a little bit of an expanded view of the next expansion. So we're putting new sites for a whole new deployment up to the northwest, and then building out what we've done on the original deployment by adding additional purpose-built towers for those areas. So we're really expanding the coverage now that additional funding is available to make that happen. Justin, you want to build on that as well?
Yeah, so we're going to add 3 new towers up on the Santee reservation, which should cover the whole Santee reservation by the time we get done. There may be a few small areas that we could utilize some extenders. And then on the Omaha reservation, we're going to add a tower in Bancroft, and then I believe the Omaha tribe has an NTIA grant also, and they're planning on building a couple towers, and we have funds to throw equipment on their towers to expand in 2 other locations, which should get us majority covered in for that reservation also. It'd be nice to be able to cover everybody.
Yeah. All right, a couple questions for the NTIA and NICC folks. So Michael, Justin, tell us a little bit about NICC and the population that you help service out there.
Sure. Basically, our students are primarily Native American students. Most of our students are low-income students. And when I say low-income students, I mean they're eligible or should be eligible for Pell funding. The majority of our students, the majority of our students are single unwed moms. It's something like a 60-30 split, and that varies back and forth term for term. or, a 60-40 split. And that varies term by term. Most of our students are either looking for full-time employment or they are full-time employed. And our biggest detractors are the same as many other community colleges. So if a student has to leave college for some reason, many times it comes down to three issues. One issue is childcare, another issue is transportation, and then a third issue is work scheduling conflicts. And so with the EBS system, we're able to help with all three of those type of areas. And I briefly touched upon earlier about how before the pandemic, many of our students were able to use video technology. So they were kind of used to, showing up to almost like a Google type or a Zoom meeting type of room. So that helped a little bit. And I may be jumping to the next question. Sorry, Steve.
That's okay. That's okay. You want to move ahead?
Yeah, that'd be great.
Yeah. Okay. Next question. What's the pain points you're looking to solve, and how did you kind of, scope this project out? Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and then, and just from my perspective, and I'm sure Justin can holler as well. But from my perspective, when COVID hit, in 2019, the beginning of 2020, we were aware of some things that were happening. For example, the 2.5 gigahertz the spectrums were going to open up for the tribes. So we were aware of that. During the same time period as COVID, where all the schools were shutting down, we did an in-depth analysis, basically, of the internet services that were provided in our area. And we had one internet service provider. At the same time, we had reverted back to a year or two before, and we had surveyed all of our students, and we asked them how many of our students had, high-speed broadband. We received responses, something like 80% felt that they received high-speed broadband. So then we dug into that the year after. Their definition of high-speed broadband was their cell phone. So I don't know if any of you guys have ever tried to write a term paper on a cell phone, but it's not incredibly helpful by any means. So anyway, back to 2020, we had one internet service provider within the Omaha reservation. And so we immediately contacted them, and they told us that, they'd be willing to help us with our students about installing internet and things like that, having the college pay for it, but it would take up to 9 months. And then that would have just been a short-term fix. So then I started contacting the local K through 12 schools as well, because they have E-rate, and E-rate is a much cheaper source of internet for any kind of a broadband. So then we were able to create the partnership with both of our nations, the Omaha Nation and the Santee Sioux Nation, for the FCC license. And then we were able to create the partnerships with the Santee Public School, Omaha Nation Public School, Walt Hill Public School, Pender Public School, and Bancroft Rosalie Public School, because their students were in the same types of situation that our students were in, where many families are low income, many families don't have reliable internet access at their homes, and the K through 12 schools are going through the same issue. So then that's kind of what helped determine the scope of our project, being able to figure out, what schools needed the assistance, what schools didn't, and then the way it turned out, all the schools within the reservation needed our assistance. They wanted the help for their K through 12 students. We needed the help for our college students. So then we just created an MOU. We've got everything set up. And then, basically we were able to start offering internet connection really close to the beginning of the fall terms for every school. And then some of the other scope of the project too is, and it just created a little bit of not a big challenge, but well, for example, like the Winnebago Nation and some of those schools wanted to be part of our project, but the Winnebago Nation is a completely separate reservation. We didn't have spectrum license to go in there. The Winnebago Nation had that, and they wanted to do their own thing. So we weren't able to help some of those schools, and that's just something to kind of watch for in the process as well. And then I don't know, Justin or Steve, did you guys want to add anything? Because I know we contacted Red Rover almost right away. And Steve was with Red Rover at the time. And he was great to work with about getting things set up. Justin was fantastic and actually, explaining to me various things and making sure that I wasn't using technical terms inappropriately all the time, even though I still do. then just one of the other scopes too is that Justin was willing to help climb towers and things like that, which he is no longer willing to do. He made that abundantly clear. And that's very cool. We were just able to get an EBS system set up on 2 different reservations, almost in a just-in-time type of format and manner.
Yeah, it's pretty impressive when you think about start to finish how quickly these actually can be deployed. And the challenge for me at the time was there was multiple projects going on at the same time. So I was definitely multitasking, keeping everyone to their deadlines of getting ready by September. So let's see, what's our next question here? What was the onboarding process like? I think it was quick and furious would be a summary, but Justin, I don't know if you got any inputs on that.
Yeah, the biggest thing was getting all the equipment set up with the SIM cards, getting all the correct settings on the MiFis, and then distributing them to the students. Throughout that process, we also started doing one-to-one devices for our students too. So we'd hand them a laptop, hand them a MiFi, basically check to see if they have internet home. If you don't have internet home, here's a MiFi, or we'll schedule a time to set up a external antenna, long range or mid range, on the outside of their house. Like Michael was saying, a lot of our students couldn't afford to pay for the internet service. They're paying $100 a month for 10 meg internet, and that was max speed was 10 meg internet, which is really tough to do a Zoom call or Teams call when their upload and their download speeds aren't consistent and very expensive. But yeah, that the biggest thing was getting all the end user equipment set up. That was one of the hardest pieces, because your tower work, that all happens right on the tower, and then you have Steve on the back end. As soon as we got him hooked up to an external source, he put in all the other stuff on the antennas and radios and get them emit and signal out, but it was hooking up all the student devices after that.
The very last mile.
Yeah, and we trained 2 or 3 groups of students, through some short course types of things to be able to teach them how to install the antennas on people's homes and items. So I mean, that was a challenge as well. As well as just getting the basic equipment, making sure that everything was here when we needed it. And we're still kind of going through some of that. I think everybody on the planet is. Everybody's still facing workforce shortages. I have no idea where the people went. So.
Yeah. Okay.
We had a few questions. I'm not sure if you guys wanted to answer some of these right now. They were kind of talking about the FCC license. I know you guys had mentioned that earlier. Can you tell the audience a little bit more about the FCC license that was required for your project?
Yeah,
Michael, you want to kind of give your synopsis of it? Or?
Sure, I can give a real brief synopsis. Between somewhere in 2019, 2020, the 2.5 gigahertz spectrums opened up. And so they opened up to tribal nations. So then both of the nations that chartered the college said the college could chase it down, which was a really good thing. And it's still a very good thing on behalf of the tribal nations. Because now the Omaha Nation and the Santee Nation both plan on creating their own telco companies, utilizing parts of those spectrums. And I know just between the conversations between Steve and I, and Justin and I over the past, I don't know, forever, there's other spectrums that can be utilized for this process as well. And I know the guys who know about this can certainly speak more to that.
Yeah, no. That's perfect. So Michael's right. It was 2019. The FCC was revisiting the EBS/2.5 spectrum, and they were determined to auction it off. And luckily for the Native American tribes, they put a priority window that Native American tribes can request this spectrum. Don't hold me to the exact number, but at least 175 plus tribes have been granted this spectrum for their tribal lands. And there's a fair amount of activity now of the tribes evaluating, with NTIA funding and other funding out there, how to solve the broadband issue on their tribal lands. And the 2.5 spectrum is one of those tools in the tool chest that they can use to get their communities connected. There is another spectrum that came out right about the same time it was officially released, was called CBRS spectrum, Citizens Broadband Radio Spectrum. This is in the same type of range as the 2.5. It's 3.5 gigahertz, a little higher. But that is actually, they call it lightly licensed. So all you really need to do is sign on to a database that logs where your equipment's placed and provides an alternative spectrum source. And there's, other than the cost of the database, there's no FCC licensing requirement, no documentation, nothing along those lines. So we actually look at both spectrums because, utilizing both spectrums can solve different challenges. One could be a more capacity issue where CBRS might be a good play, where the 2.5 EBS spectrum is great for longer distances and higher power to go further. There's another question out there about, can you use existing cellular equipment like an iPhone? The answer is yes. These networks are data only networks. So think like, common wireless internet service provider. So it doesn't have the voice capabilities. So what you do is you lose making voice calls, SMS messages, and or 911 calls, but it is a data network. So you could take a tablet, whether it be Microsoft or Apple. There's now Chromebooks and of course laptops that have LTE modems embedded to them. So those are perfect data usage devices. So you can take a private network SIM card and place into those devices, much like what Michael and Justin did for their community, and give them the data access to their homes or while in travel. Currently, eSIM in private networks is not formally out there. I think we're probably 6 months away from it, but that's a great addition because with eSIM you can change a device from being a private network and then on the fly basically flip it to a carrier-based network and vice versa. So that's some exciting technology. Khajiit and one side of the business has actually already implemented eSIMs, and it's going to trickle down into the private networks as we go forward. So let's see, let me get back to the slideshow and see what our next, back it up one. There we go. I think, Michael, you kind of covered this a little bit already, but what was your experience with, partnering with Red Rover and now Khajiit?
Yeah, our experience was great, and it still continues to be great. And I know Justin will be able to speak a little more because he works more with the day-to-day. But generally, we get our equipment as soon as it's available. Everything that we need, for example, the maps, just all kinds of various technical pieces. It has just been a great experience. And Justin can hopefully say some more.
Oh yeah, I'm just gonna say, like in planning, it really helped out a lot. I could send Steve some longitude, latitude coordinates, how high of a tower I was planning. They plug it in the RF maps, send back an RF diagram like we seen earlier in the slideshow. Kind of give me a good idea of if that placement of the tower is going to be a good spot or if I'm going to have to move it, a couple miles down. Because the majority of the service runs about 7-mile radius, depending on the hills and trees and buildings and stuff in the way, which sometimes that RF modeling kind of gives a good idea of, ridges or tall plains that are in the way of, which would limit the amount of coverage. So yeah, it definitely helps a lot there. I think originally when we were talking about just adding the tower in Macy, it was on an old wind tower. It was just an anemometer tower, and it was probably only 50 foot off the ground. And we had Steve do a RF signal. What would it look like if we just bumped it up 50 foot? And I think it broadened our coverage to the north side by another 3-4 miles just by pushing it 54 or 50 more foot in there. So it makes a big difference. And And that way you know that you're gonna get a little bang for your buck too when you spend that money on the tower. You're not just buying a tower, throw equipment on there and hope that it covers the people you're hoping to cover.
Yeah, definitely eliminates the guesswork. And, and last, I don't know, it was early this year or late last year, Justin was, drop a pinpoint on a map and says, we might be able to get this property here. Let's see what it looks like. And then he move it a mile or two. Let's try it again over here. And, that's the trial and error of just, how to get the best coverage and find out what's available. So I think this gets to our last question. This is probably more on you, Justin, of your kind of expansion plans. I know it's a hurry up and wait endeavor within NTIA, but you kind of mentioned in the prior slide of looking at more towers and larger coverage areas.
Yeah, so that's the primary expansion right now would be, like you said, we're waiting on the APA to get the go ahead, and I do have another meeting this afternoon, like 4:30. I'm supposed to talk to the NTIA about where we're setting with that. But the number one is going to be our Bancroft Tower, and then we're going to get the Santee towers up. We do have 2 prospective locations, and we are working with the Santee tribe now to kind of get some property that would work really well, or some high points. It may not be exactly the same ones we wrote into the grants, but they should still provide the same coverage. And then we're also looking at doing 6 sector instead of the 4 sector for the antennas, which would provide better coverage near the antennas and further range.
Perfect. Yeah, kind of the approach I always do with these projects, and this starts with the early days with Michael and Justin was, really there's kind of 3 phases to the project. Phase 1 is what spectrum is available, and that's really the important point. What do you have, either like an FCC license with 2.5? If not, what does CBRS look like in this given area? And then you have the unlicensed frequencies like 5 gigahertz and others. That's really kind of the first step of understanding what the spectrum options are. Then the second phase on this is, as Justin just kind of indicated, is what locations are available to you. Where do you have maybe existing towers that you used for other purposes in the past? In the case of like Justin, what property might be able to be acquired or available to potentially put a tower? Lacking towers, are there existing tall structures, grain silos, for example, water towers that might be out there, or we've used a couple water towers for this deployment. So they call that the vertical asset. What tall things are available to you? And from that point in time, then you can start getting into the design work of what the coverage model looks like. Where might you need the signal capabilities? Where do you want to direct it to hit certain individuals or hit certain buildings? That all kind of breaks down into the whole RF plan of, okay, this is what we have, this is where we need to cover, and how can we make that happen? And I guess with that, we can open up to additional Q&As and see if there's any other pending questions or areas you want to explore out there.
Yeah, I actually had a question come in, and it kind of maybe builds on what you were just talking about. And this question asks, what is the first step when determining whether an area is a good candidate for a network?
Yep, for sure. I'll start off with competing technologies. There's a lot of excitement and interest to, fiber to the home or fiber to the building. And, king for a day, that's the best way to go if you can get fiber to a particular area. The challenge in many cases of doing fiber is the expense and time it takes to deploy a fiber network. And especially if you're looking to do fiber as a last mile to a person's home or to a particular building, some of these NTIA projects out there, they're talking, tens, if not hundreds of miles of pulling fiber just to reach the tribal boundaries. And you can imagine what that would take, both in cost and particular years to get deployed. A wireless network allows you to move a little bit faster. So perhaps there's an immediacy of getting some semblance of connectivity that you can do via wireless deployment while the fiber is being brought to that location. So you may have one technology for the immediate needs, and then that knowing that down the road that will be replaced by fiber once it's there and available. So I think going back to the term, you got to pick the right tool for the job, and and determining is expediency the issue, is it speed's the issue, and how to approach it. And then it goes back to the 3 steps we just talked about: what spectrum's available if you're going down the wireless route, what vertical assets are available, towers, water towers, structures, and then where's the need required, and is it possible and feasible to go from your tower or broadcast location to hit the particular areas you need. And that's where the RF models really come into play, because yes, hilly, deep canyons, that creates definitely a geographical challenge of trying to overcome the terrain limitations to provide services in areas. But in some cases, that may be the only means to get services. That the option of fiber is just too remote, or potentially prone to physical damage. That if you're stringing fiber across telephone lines and a tree falls and the line breaks, then you lost your internet for, particularly, it could be a fair amount of time before they can get a service crew out there and repair those damaged fiber strands. So really has to look at all options and find the best tool for the job, and plan for that accordingly.
Awesome. Just had a question come in.
Yeah.
Can you speak on data speeds you're seeing with your private network? Is it LTE or 5G?
Yeah, most of the deployments, I'll use from historically, let's say within the last year and prior, have all been 4G networks, just because that was really the technology at the time. The other challenge just gets down to the cost factor. 5G really didn't get rocking and rolling until perhaps last year, when a lot of the deployments were made, and the equipment manufacturers were still treating this as a premium product. So it was not cheap to deploy a 5G network. That's changed. That changed dramatically. A lot of our deployments going forward are going to be 4G with 5G upgradable capabilities. And that means that, let's say as Justin continues to build out his towers, that down the road, should he want to go to a 5G network, there won't be a rip and replace, that he can leave the equipment that's on the tower, and either via software upgrade and an additional, think of it like almost like a switch down at the base of the tower, they can change the personality from a 4G to a 5G network. The speeds depend on a lot of factors: how much spectrum you have, what spectrum level you're operating at. When they really talk about the very ultra fast, high speed 5G networks, they're operating in a very, very high range of the frequency, 60 gigahertz to 90 gigahertz. And that's a very, very fast signal speed. The challenge with it doesn't propagate very well. You basically go a city block and the signal drops off. So it's you can get a gig speed over a 5G network, but the distance is very small, and that's where you see these deployments in cities now, where basically every block, a street light is remodeled, and they put a little small cell tower on there to provide that 5G capability. So every block, they're putting up this small radio. That's the true high-end capabilities of 5G. If you're thinking of the 2.5 spectrum range, which is the spectrum granted to the tribes, via algorithms, there is more efficiency in the 5G network. It's not going to go from, let's say, 100 megahertz to a gigahertz, or 100 megabits per second to a gig per second. But you'll see, let's say on the low end, a 20% bump, so it'll be 20% faster than a traditional 4G network. And in some cases, it could be as high as 50, depending on the type of equipment deployed. So there is a bump in speed, absolutely. I think right now the reason most are leaning to 4G with a 5G upgradability is not so much the equipment going on the tower, but the equipment being placed into the home. A 5G device currently is probably twice the cost of a 4G device. And when you start looking at potentially 100 devices being deployed, that cost does have an impact. So I think people are putting the foundations in the right place to move that direction. And then over time, as device cost diminishes, like all technology does, it'll be cost effective to upgrade the device at the residence, for example, to a 5G device and give them the additional speed. That's a long-winded answer, but I hope that helped.
Yes. The next question, I'm wondering if maybe Justin, you could speak to this, but it's asking about, the workload that was put onto you and your team. A lot of tribes that we work with are really limited on the number of technology staff that they have. So if you could speak to that a little bit.
I'd say the workload at the short term was very extensive. I was working probably 80 hours a week, doing 40 hours of my normal job and 40 hours on towers and tower work when we were getting them installed, which that was for, it was like a month and a half that we were really heavy into that. Then after that, the technical upkeep of the towers has not been very much at all. We've had to reboot a couple of them, and some of them we've lost point-to-point signal, and we just had to do some corrections at the, where the point-to-point was at, whether it was because some water got in a line or something along that lines, we blew it out. It hasn't really caused a lot of extra work after the initial deployment and getting all the basically getting over the hump. The upkeep of it has not been that hard at all. And it's been surprising to me. That was one of my biggest fears before we jumped into it. It was going to tack on, 2 or 3 more jobs onto me, and I just wouldn't have time to do it. And we did end up hiring a wireless technician. It did take us about a year to find somebody qualified and apply for the position, but they have been doing a lot of the minor maintenances of keeping individual students going. But as far as the towers, they've stood up there and kept running.
Great.
That's great. That's a really good point, because I think that's, a fear of a lot of, tribes. If they've only got 2 or 3 people on staff, how much extra work after this is deployed is that going to take away from, from their other positions? So that was very good.
I would say you need 1 more FTE to depending on how many households you're going to be running internet to, but you need at least 1 more FTE to take care of the individual houses. The individual houses cause more work than the actual tower work generally. Then you can do a lot of the tower stuff remotely, doing your updates and stuff like that through the cloud.
So I guess that could depend then on the size of the campus, or if it's maybe going into like a reservation or a casino, or what I mean. So that could vary. So
yeah, if you're doing 200 households or 1,000 households, I'm sure that's be quite a difference. But
yeah, for sure. Let's see. I need to just ask a question. How many houses are connected? Maybe how many houses are connected to your network?
The majority of our connections are MiFi, which would be the little small units that just plug into the laptops. A lot of our students move from house to house, so it's not. I really can't say on houses. We have about 200 devices out that are currently connected to the system. They're not always on. I think we have 20 devices that are always on that you see activity from all the time. Majority of the MiFis, they jump on, they do their homework, and then they get off. So you kind of see those numbers go up and down, but they don't stay steady. So you get an accurate number of all online, but right around 200. Our internet speeds that we provide to the students is 25.3, 25.5. Kind of depends on the student in the area. and how far they are from the tower. Majority of our students are within that mile range of our towers. So, and that's partially why we put the towers where they were at. We tried to stay close to where the main population was at. But that's where, the expansion projects kind of pick up those smaller pockets of houses that are spread out between the major population areas.
Gotcha.
Awesome. Well, I don't have any other questions. If anybody else on the call has anything they want to throw in that chat, that'd be great. In the meantime, is there anything that you wanted to wrap up with?
Guy, you got me on that one. I didn't think about that. In conclusion, no,
Yeah, that's right.
Thanks for offering up about an hour of your day. Hopefully what we covered makes a lot of sense. There's a lot of different use cases out there for a private network. I'm talking to some tribes that are interested in smart agriculture, just monitoring their fields without having to put people out there to actually walk the fields and see what's going on and there. One of the probably growing areas of interest is actually building private networks inside buildings, whether it be a manufacturing facility. For example, there's a case study floating around somewhere out there where John Deere actually put up a private network both inside and outside their factories so they can offer internet services. Because you think about that size manufacturing plant, it's a city in itself, and traditional Wi-Fi is spotty at best. There's some discussions now about actually using a private CBRS based network inside a casino, just because it's a more secure and lower latency network than traditional Wi-Fi. So it gives, in the case of internal applications, it gives a secure network for internal use. For customers' experience, it provides them faster ability to actually place bets if they're doing online gaming, things along that line. So there's definitely a lot of applications. A lot of what we're trying to do for tribes is just get some of the remote buildings connected and be able to put security cameras out there so that the trespassing and or theft can be reduced without with the limited resources in the large space of trying to roll a police officer out there to investigate something. They can zoom in and really understand what's going on. So yeah, just anywhere you have a connectivity issue, just think in the back of your mind, would a private network perhaps solve those challenges?
Well, I'll jump in real quick if that's okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Because one other thing I've just got three things I kind of wanted to mention quick. One, for any of those folks out there like me who don't really know a lot of the tech stuff, and maybe this isn't the right place to share it, but the 2.5 gigahertz systems, if your tribe has one, or if your nation has one, you can split those spectrums out so that way multiple entities can be using not the same signal, but different levels of the same spectrum. For example, if your nation has a telco that's going up, you could also do an EBS system on a different portion of that spectrum. The next piece is that I know NICC's EBS isn't perfect by any means, but I mean that's just kind of where you come into some of it with your partners as well. For example, most of the K through 12 schools didn't have dedicated IT staff to help out with the project. Some of the K through 12 schools still don't have dedicated IT staff. I think the best example of that was, I think it was like the volleyball instructor who was also the word processing teacher, or the volleyball coach who was also the word processing teacher, just ended up with the hat of IT director. So you've just got to kind of keep some of those issues in mind as well, but also just make sure that you have good relationships with all of your partners. Whether it's a K through 12 system, whether it's your nation, just any of your partners, including Khajiit. It just certainly helps out quite a bit. And thank you very, very much for your time. And I will be quiet now. Thank you.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Yeah, those are all great points. This was such an interesting conversation. It was really cool for you guys to come on and share your story, and to see how that works and your progress. And it was really great. So I appreciate you guys coming over to share that. For everybody on the call, I did put Steve's email in there. Oh, good. You put yours in there too. If you need to reach out to anybody with like a copy of the presentation, etc., you can always email us here at tribalhub.com. Don't forget, a copy of this presentation will be emailed to you tomorrow for you to share out with anybody on your team who may have missed it. And with that, everybody have a great afternoon, and we will talk to you all soon. Bye.